Welcome again to Qdabra's weekly webinar. This is Patrick also at Qdabra. Today I'm presenting on how to transfer data from one form to another. I got 3 demos for you on how to do this, and then we have another cool demo at the end on something that I think is really interesting. And anyway, glad to have everyone. Thank you for joining us. First of all, before we get started, I would like to let Melissa do our quick advertisement.
All right, thank you, Patrick. I just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about Qdabra before we get started here. First of all, we have a great community, InfoPathDev.com. And if you guys haven't checked this out, definitely go to the website. You can get product downloads there. There's lots of support options, and there's weekly blogs as well. So definitely check out our active support forum. Also, we have ASAP support. So if you don't want to wait for that response in the forum, definitely try our pay-as-you-go support option. Qdabra also does consulting work for hire, so our MVPs help you build it right the first time and offer the best solutions at the best price. So you have a project you want to work on, definitely give Qdabra a call and we can help you out. We also have great tools and templates available. These all have we have free trials available and the 30-day money-back guarantee if you're not completely satisfied. So definitely give them a test drive, see how they can work for you. Qdabra can build a lasting, scalable solution with our web services as well. There's a free trial available for DDXL, and you can download it, see how it works for your company, and definitely check it out on our website. And lastly, we provide assistance to those wanting a better understanding of Microsoft InfoPath and SharePoint. We provide training classes, both online and in person. And our next training is coming up in August. We have both an InfoPath Masterclass that's going to be online, is an online webinar, and we also have a 101 course at the end of August. And that will be, like I said, on the end of August. And we have an in-person course coming up in the Seattle, Washington area, and that is going to be the second week of September. So all those dates are listed on our website. If you have any questions, certainly reach out to myself or to Patrick, and we can give you more information on that. And I also just wanted to let you guys know, certainly check us out on Twitter, follow us at Qdabra Software. Otherwise, check out our Facebook page, Facebook/Qdabra Software. Great places to get more information, know what's up with our webinars and training, and just learn more about the company. So thank you so much for your time, everyone, and we can get started.
Thanks, Alyssa. So yeah, just to follow on to Alyssa's point, we do solutions for large companies every week. We're doing projects. We've got about 20, 30 active projects we're working on, and every week we come up with something new that's cool. And we want to share that with you, and that's the purpose of this webinar, is to share all the cool stuff that we figure out on our own. And this, you'll notice that these prices here on this page are lower. So if you mention the webinar, you'll get a discount for the class. So just those 2 things. Anyway, today we're talking about how to pull data from one form into another. And what are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about pulling data from one InfoPath form or library into another form. There are 3 ways to do this. We can query the data using a library. I'll show you a demo of that. That's the stock out-of-box way to do it that everyone's familiar with, but we'll go through that again. We also can do kind of tricky, we have a couple techniques using a column to store an intermediate value that we use to pull data. And we'll also show a demo on using input parameters, which is, I think, the best practice. Of course, obviously when we're doing this, we need to be able to create links in the form. So we'll show you that technique. We'll talk a little bit about copying data. We're going to do another webinar next week on copying data because it's such a deep topic that we don't have time today to cover it all. Why do you care? Well, obviously your forms, you want to automate the input process so that people don't have to do a lot of typing. You want to help them pre-populate data in their form. You also have forms that lead to other forms. So you might have an invoice request that leads to an invoice, or you might have a customer contact that leads to a customer support. You've got business processes with series of forms in them. One form leads to another form. So it's very important to link the forms together, and this is the technique that you will use. You'll use a link, and you'll pull the data from one form into another. So let's talk about those 3 techniques. So the first technique is going to be the simple technique. Let's see how we do that. So on my machine here, I've got a SharePoint 2010 site, and we have just plain lists. I actually used the same list in last week's demo. And I've got a form. This form is going to connect to that list, and it's going to just pre-populate the data based on the drop-down. Now, this is the standard way you do this kind of thing. Is you're going to go in here. I've just opened and created this form from scratch. It's a browser-based form, and what I'm going to do is add that data connection to that list. So everyone has done this before. Very simple to add a received data connection to a SharePoint library or list. And here I'm just going to copy the URL for that guy into our wizard. We don't care about fixing up it. It'll figure it out. And there it is, customers, and we can bring in a bunch of different information about that customer. Okay, easy to do. We'll do it on load. Why do we want to do it on load? Well, we want to populate the data on load so that we can give the user some kind of a drop-down that they can use to populate their data. And to create the drop-down, what we do is we just go into our secondary data source here on the right. Notice I changed from the main data source to the secondary. And I'm just going to right-click on the company, and I'm just going to add a drop-down list box to my form, just like that. Now, once this has been chosen, now the other way to do this, obviously, is to add a field here saying, hey, here's the company. And then to add this to the form and make it a drop-down list box. We don't want to do it there. We want to do it here. Copy it out to there. And then you would go in here and you would connect it to this customer list, just like this. And of course, it's already pre-configured. You probably want the value to be the ID, so that if the name changes, it will automatically work well with the change. Okay, so we've configured our drop-down, and now what are we going to do? Well, when the drop-down changes, we're going to add a rule, and we're going to set the other information in our form. So in the main data source, I might have information on the contact. I might have information on the phone number, email, whatever. And this information, we don't want them to have to worry about typing it. We'll see another technique at the end of the webinar today with the zip codes and cities and states. But let's just say, for example, I've got my simple form here, and I don't want to automatically have to type in all this information. Then the technique is to add a rule when they change the drop-down, and the rule is going to have an action that sets the values of those three fields. Just like this. Really easy to do. We'll set the value of the contact. And how do we do that? Well, we're going to set it equal to the value of the secondary data source contact, filtering it where the company name, so the company is equal to the company that we've chosen from the main data source. And this is a very common technique, right? A lot of dialogues here, but people know and love this technique. And let's just do one for now. You'll get the idea. We can add actions for all the other ones too. And now when we preview this, it's connecting to my website. So we're getting the, of course, this will work in the browser just fine. So when we look at pulling in information here, is it actually filling in anything? It's not. What's wrong? So we set a rule to set the contact's value based on the title. The problem here is that let's see here, the rule is wrong, obviously. You know it's a demo when it doesn't work. So we want to fix this. And this is the most uninteresting demo of the webinar today, but I should get this right, shouldn't I? I'm going to show you this at the end here, but basically the idea is that you're going to set the so you need to set the contact name, and this is the contact in our form, not in the secondary data source. So there's a problem. So I need to set the contact name, and I'm filtering it based on the secondary data source. So the secondary data source here, we're going to select the secondary data source, and once again, drill down on the contact name and make sure that, the name of the company. So the name of the company has to equal what we've set up in the main data source. Okay, so we switch back to the main data source and select the company, and now this should work. Did not. Okay, well, we'll see another example at the end of the webinar. I don't want to waste people's time. I know people probably are helping me. Anyway, sorry about the, sometimes the demos don't work out exactly. The other demos, though, I have pre-canned. So this first demo, anyway, you get the idea. And I'll show you another example at the end that's more interesting. But the first technique is you're going to have a rule that sets a value based on a filter. Second technique is you're going to pass data via columns. So now this technique I've actually canned. I know this is going to work. And this technique here is, let me just show you this technique. We have an expense report form here. And this expense report form actually is, what it's doing is it's going to create a link. And that link then is we're going to click on it to copy data from the form. So this will work in any form. What you're going to do is you're going to have your form there, and I've picked the expense report form because everyone knows about it. It's very commonly used demo sample that we have. So we have a simple form here. I'll fill this out with some information. And we'll put in one expense. And when we submit it, it's going to give us a link here at the bottom. Now this link is automatically generated in the form. I'll show you how to do this in a second. I just want to show you the demo first. And when I click on it, it opens a different form, and it pulls in that information, the $2 expense, total of that expense report form. So how do we do this? A quick look at the sample. Now you get all these samples as part of the class, part of the webinar today. We have a source and a target. The source form is this expense report form, the one you just saw. And at the very bottom you'll see that we have a link that we're generating. Now this is very important. Don't add the link from the controls here because you won't be able to make it look pretty. So one of the things you can do is you can add the hyperlink here from the controls, but you don't want to do that. In this case, what you want to do is you want to add the link from here, it's a static link, and you want to use the insert hyperlink, not the control hyperlink. Now, if we right-click on this and look at the properties of this hyperlink, you'll see, if I can actually select it, you'll see that we have an address, which is we're setting it equal to. So we've got an address that is essentially equal to this this other form. So you see this is another form. We're specifying the entire address because we have to open the browser, and we're not actually passing any parameters to it. So we're not doing anything fancy here. We're just saying, hey, open the form from this location. We just use that very long link. And then in the target form, in the form that gets opened, we have recently upgraded our Office 2003 64-bit version here, and there are a few issues with it. So try this again. So here's the target form. Now when this opens, we have a rule on load, and the onload rule is underneath data. And the rule, if you can see here, is actually it's determining the transfer reference. xref. And then it's copying the fields. Now how do we do that? Well, we're using actually a column to affect this. So in the first form library, we have a column we're using. And you can see the column here. If I scroll over, you'll see that we have this xref column here on the very far right. And we're actually setting a value, a unique value in this column based on the username and the date and time. Actually, just the date. And then what the target form does is the target form on open, it actually goes in and finds, it generates the same reference number, and then it actually queries the data connection using that reference number, and then it copies the values from that library into the form. So this is kind of a simple technique that doesn't require anything off the shelf. I'm sorry, it's all off the shelf. It doesn't require anything, any fancy plugins from Qdabra. It doesn't require any web services. You just basically connect the target form to the library, and then you have this xref thing. We're essentially using that column as a clipboard to pass data back and forth. Now you could say, well, Patrick, that's potentially error-prone, and you're right. The issue with the second technique is that if you have to be careful when you're doing multiple edits, same person, because you only have one column, and that unique value has to be unique across those edits. And right now it isn't. The one I set up isn't. But you could create one that is unique. But you can't edit two forms at the same time because we're essentially using it as a clipboard. There's only one clipboard. So that technique works, as you just saw. So that's a nice technique. Now we have some questions. I'm going to wait until the end to answer these. And yes, Dana, you will have access to all of these forms later. And I'll even get the first demo working. But the last demo, and this is not the last demo, it's the demo before the last demo is the school technique. But the last demo I want to show you is the last technique is to use an input parameter. And here we have, once again, two forms. We have a source form and a target form. And we're doing the same kind of thing. The source form is just a really simple form here. And we have a link in it. And this link actually is the same kind of link you just saw. It's a static link, not a control. And the link is actually pointing at a field in the form. This is different. So the first link you saw was just an address. But now we're actually pointing it to a field in the form. Now why do we want to do that? Well, this field, and I didn't really name these fields anything except the default. This field here is actually calculated when we submit. So we click the submit button, you'll see there's a rule, and we're setting the value of the field equal to this long URL. You can see this here. We've got the testing site, au.formsword.com, and this is the location of the target InfoPath form. We want to open the browser, so we have to pass in all this yucky stuff, but it works just fine. And at the very end, we say, hey, ID equals, and this is the key piece right here, is this thing at the end. Is you add an ampersand with an ID or whatever it is equal to your field, and that's the parameter that we're going to pass. So this is going to open up that target form. Let me just show you how it works here. Okay, so here's the form you just saw, and we'll good morning, America, and good morning, good afternoon, New Zealand. Actually, New Zealand is behind us, so we'll say good afternoon, Europe, and good evening, Japan. And when we submit it, it's going to create that link based on field 4. And when we click on this link, now it's going to open up a form in the browser, and it's going to pass an ID for this form that we just saved to the form. And the form, the target form is going to open up, and it's going to have a rule. This is the first time I'm hitting this form. This one I should have done this before the class. It has a rule that copies one of the values in. Good morning, America. And let's take a look at that. So once again, the source form, this is a very simple source form, right? This is just to show you the technique. Obviously, you admit your form is going to look a lot different than this. But the technique is that we create that link, and then the target form then has a rule And what we're doing here is we're adding our plugin, our Qdabra qRules plugin. And when we finish loading, we actually have a command that we can use called getInputParameter. And that getInputParameter is essentially just getting the input parameter for that ID, where the key equals ID. We just have one rule, a bunch of actions. First thing it needs to do is it needs to find out which form it is that it needs to get the information from. It's ID 4. Then what it does is it queries the data connection to get that data. In this case, we're using the wrong data connection. This is a sample I did earlier. But it's actually the data connection needs to be changed. The name of the data connection needs to be changed. I did this for one of our esteemed customers earlier. But you can see here that the data connection is pointing to the right location here. It should be. Link source is what I want. Doesn't really matter what we pull into the form. And we'll just save that out to make sure you get the right version. So it's going to pull that data in from that library, and then it just sets those fields, field 1, field 2, for that. Okay, so that's how you pass a parameter from one form to another, and that is essentially the third demo. The downside of this, of course, is you need a plug-in or you need to write a little bit of code to get the input parameter. Not hard to do. You can basically inject your form with our plug-in. You don't have to write code. You don't have to have Visual Studio, and it's very easy to set up that rule to get the input parameter. And then once you have the input parameter, you can go ahead and copy the data from the library. Now, there's a limitation to all these techniques. There's 3 limitations, actually. Number 1 is that if you have repeating data, how are you going to loop through and copy all of that data? So, for example, let's say that expense report form that you saw. Let's say I want to copy all of those different items into my target form. How would I do it? So we'll talk about that next week. There definitely you can do it. There's actually an out-of-the-box way to do it, and I've presented on this before a couple of years ago. I had a webinar on that. Another limitation is, how do I load the data from a separate XML file? All of the examples I showed you today were loading information from a library or a list. So next week we'll show you how to do that, how to actually load it from an XML file. And this is pretty tricky because you have to dynamically determine the name of the file that you want to load the data from. So we'll show you how to do that next week. We've got a new technique for that. And then sometimes you just got too much data. Like even if it isn't repeating, you might have 40 or 50 different fields, and you don't want to have to do set value for all of those. So there's a technique to transform a large amount of data very quickly, and I'll show you that technique also next week. All of these techniques will use qRules. That's the caveat here, but it's all very easy to do if you have qRules, and we have that free trial available. So join us next week for that. But first, there's one more really cool demo, and this one I promise you will work. It's the same technique that we saw earlier. Let's see if I have it already open. I don't. So we have a technique here. We have a T-shirt, and let me just demo this quickly. This is actually an email form that we're sending out to some of our beloved customers, and this is, hey, we've got a new shirt for you available. We've got this this shirt that we're going to be sending out for people, and so you want people to choose, their size, right? So here I am. I'm XL here. Now, what's interesting here is not that. I mean, the form is kind of interesting. It's an email form. It doesn't require any data connections. But the interesting thing is I can type in my zip code. Boom. It just automatically picked my city. Gee, that's pretty cool. Does anyone know another zip code? So it's basically automatically looking up, and that's very fast. So how do we do that? Let's see. We can pick some other random zip code, right? New York. Okay. So this is a really interesting technique you can use in your forms to look up zip codes, because why bother having someone type the city and the state, right? How do we do this? Well, the out-of-box way to do this is pretty slow. Let's take a look at it. So out-of-box, we have form, and I know I have it here. Just one second. The old technique, it's the same form, but this has the old technique. Now, if I preview this one, you'll see, if I type in the zip code, watch, 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. Okay, finally, after 5 seconds, we got it. that's a big file. There's 3 megabytes of zip codes in this file that we're going to send you as part of the class goodies today. How did we do it? Well, here's how not to do it. First of all, this is the old form. So what happens is when we tab out of zip code, we've got a rule. And the rule is setting the value of the zip code, right? And we're just doing it like you would expect. We're saying, hey, set the value of the city based on the filter where the zip code is equal to, the city for the secondary zip code is equal to, this is the one that has all, I don't know, 10,000 zip codes in it, where the, or 100,000, where the city is equal to the, let's see here, we've got city is equal to, there's a filter here where it's saying, hey, I want the zip code in the secondary data source to equal the zip code in the one that's chosen, right, the one they typed in the main data source. Now, this is exactly what I was trying to set up in the first demo. Why is this bad? Well, it's because there's, 100,000 zip codes or somewhere close to that, right, somewhere between 10 and 100,000. So this is not the way you want to do it. We have to give a shout out to Jimmy Rishe, one of our InfoPath MVPs, for figuring out the cool way, which everyone here knows, just that he's the one that remembered it, and that is, here's the cool form. So here's a form that's lickety-split. Let's see this again. Once again, we're typing in our zip code here. I don't know, let's type in 7024234. There's no city for that. But Illinois has one, 61234 is on one. That was very fast, right? So once again, how did we do it? We saw the technique that was slow. The technique that you want to use is current. So we have this filter. We have a filter, same filter, but instead of actually selecting the zip code, so the first one is we're selecting the zip code from the secondary data source, but we're actually comparing it equal to current. That's the trick, is you add an expression here for current, and you'll get the sample, but that makes it so much faster. So that's it for my demos. I want to remind folks that we do have a webinar kit available, and if you've got questions, now's the time to ask them. Any question you have, we do demos on demand here. If you fill out the feedback form, you'll get the webinar kit, which includes the samples from today's demo, including the one from the first demo that I will fix to make sure it works. But the same technique was in the last demo I showed you, which is, when you're pre-populating a form, you have a drop-down, you pull data from a list, and then you set the field values based on the drop-down where you're filtering the value. So we do have this kit available. If you're watching this webinar on YouTube and you did not participate actively in the webinar by filling out a feedback form, you can go up to this link and you can actually download the webinar. We have a small processing fee, and we also sell subscriptions to our webinars every week. We do about 45 or so a year, so we skip a few weeks. So questions, we have a question from David. Any thought on why current is so much faster? I knew you'd ask that question, David. And it is early morning here in Seattle, and I was up late last night. But current is faster because it's actually selecting the location where that zip code was typed in. So current, it's able to, because we're filtering it based on the first value. So the first value is the 98033 for Kirkland, right? It's a zip code, right? So when we know that's 98033, right? So when we actually filter it based on that equal sign, it's actually already in the list at that location because the list is ordered by zip code. So it's very easy for us then to go in and just pick out the current row, the city from that current row, right? So that doesn't explain exactly how it's working, but you get the idea. Is it's not actually going through that entire list searching for it. It's actually just using the position that it already knows about, using current to get it. So that's a great question, though. Any other questions or quick demo topics? I am here to demo on demand. Kevin's got a question. You can take this offline if you like, but is the only option to use a parameter in the URL solution for the rich text form, let's see here, is to point the URL to the location of the template. I have found that limiting if my target template file is constantly updated, is being constantly updated. So let's see here, I'm trying to understand this. So Your question here is, if I were to restate it, is the only solution here to use the yeah, so I think what you're asking is, when you're copying values from a source form and the form is changed, like let's say they go and edit it, right? Then your target form isn't going to be updated, obviously, because the target form updated it, right? At one point in time, it copied the values over, and therefore it wasn't linked to the source form. I think that's what you mean. What you want to do is, you want to link them back directly. So you want to unload. They would have an ID in them, and it would automatically recopy the values when they're opened, which is the way to do it. And of course, you can use web forms, browser-based forms to do that. The form is going to have an on-open or an on-load rule, form load rule, and it's just going to look up that value again from that source library and copy the values every time it gets opened. And that's kind of what we're doing in our samples here. Both of the samples I showed, the number 2 and number 3 demos, with the column link and the what we call the column target and the link target. When we're using a column to pass information, that target form is open from the link, but it's not using any. It's not passing a parameter, so the form just opens and it just copies the values using the most recent xref. So that technique isn't going to work for you because that's going to get stale very quickly. But the third technique will, and that's using an ID. So you just need to make sure that when you open those forms that you use an ID, an input parameter, something on open to have them go fetch the results again. Now here's another technique. Let's say you create the form to begin with the ID, and you save it. Well, you don't have to open that form again with the ID. You can store the ID in the form, and therefore the next time it opens, you get input parameters, there's nothing there, that's fine, but you've still got the ID. So you already got the ID, so then you can go and you can refresh it. So that technique will work to refresh it. You just need to make sure that you have another rule in there that automatically saves. Well, you want to set the ID, first of all, and then use it again when you reopen the form. So great question. Any other questions for me? If not, I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Don't forget we're here for you. And if you've got any, let's see here. I think that's it for the questions. I'm just going to check one more time here. Thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to having you again next week. We'll talk about copying and repeating data. And as Alyssa mentioned earlier, if you have any questions on our what we provide, feel free to reach out to us in Twitter or in Facebook. We also, like I said, have this discount for the class. If you mention that you saw this class advertisement on our webinar, then we'll give you the discount. Thanks. Talk to you soon.